Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
As every hour goes by, the search area gets bigger and bigger.
When Flight 370 went off grid on March the 8th, 2014, it became an international mystery.
It's just not acceptable for an aircraft full of passengers to vanish. The world can't tolerate that.
How can a state-of-the-art plane and 239 passengers and crew simply disappear?
The Malaysian 370 could be the 21st century Marie Celeste.
Nothing's ruled out over the mysterious loss of a Malaysian airliner.
It challenges everything we know about modern aviation technology and exposes disturbing gaps in communication and security.
It's how we think outside the box to help us manage this kind of situation.
We've gathered some of the world's leading experts in air travel to explore 10 vital missing links surrounding the disappearance of Flight 370.
We've got so much smart technology. We've got our mobile phones, we've got GPS, we can find anything anywhere in the world. We've actually lost a plane.
Will this terrifying incident change our travel through the skies forever? Kuala Lumpur International Airport. It's one of the biggest and busiest airports in Asia. Like many other aviation hubs around the world, hundreds of flights take off from here every day. On March the 7th, 2014, a few hours before its scheduled departure, 227 passengers are checking into Malaysia Flight 370. Flying overnight, they're due to arrive in Beijing at 6:30 a.m. The passengers first have to go through standard airport security. While their identification documents are checked and their luggage screened, the Boeing 777 is being prepared for departure. Reporting into work, the 12 crew members of Flight 370 are headed for the plane. They too have to clear security.
What Flight 370 has flagged up is that more needs to be done in terms of looking at the flight crew themselves.
This security footage shows both Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah and his co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid going through a scanner before getting on the plane.
The easiest way to go through security and harm aviation is through the crew. Nobody checks the crew.
In many countries, the only thorough background check pilots submit to is when signing up with an airline. But before a flight, they simply get waved through the scanner.
It appeared to show the captain going through the scanner, and then the security officer stepped forward and literally pat him on the chest and then sent him through. So there is a gap there.
If there is a bad apple among the pilots, you have the risk of someone who is going to make use of the loopholes to disappear from the sky.
While the flight crew makes its way to the plane, the passengers go through ground security with their passports. Two passengers about to get on Flight 370 are traveling on stolen passports, but they don't get picked up.
The fact that background checks weren't properly done with regard to the people getting on board this plane is a serious concern for me.
They are later identified as Iranian asylum seekers. But how did they manage to slip through passport control without getting detected? Interpol has a database with details of more than 40 million stolen or missing passports.
All contributing states to Interpol, and there's about 160 of those, have access to the database. But unfortunately, it's not a compulsory issue that countries have to interrogate that database.
In fact, most countries, including Malaysia, don't use it regularly to screen passengers. This alarming gap may raise the pressure to change international passport protocols.
I think we'll find that Interpol's database will now be used a lot more frequently, but the cost and access means has to be easy.
Passports cleared. Like passengers everywhere, those travelling on Flight 370 proceed to security checkpoints for screening. They're checked for explosives, weapons, and dangerous materials.
We get our bags checked, we get checked going through scanners, but actually, does this indicate that there is a loophole somewhere?
Since 9/11, luggage and body scans have become mandatory in airports all around the world. But the process is not as comprehensive as we think. Our carry-on bags don't always get enough attention.
You stand in line for an hour, you think this is very high security. But if you look at the actual screening, it takes probably between 12 to 15 seconds. Now, there is a person sitting in front of the baggage check machine, and they see an image every 8 seconds. I don't know anybody who can really check what is in the luggage in 8 seconds.
We have weaknesses in there because there's certain fundamental functions we just haven't yet got the equipment to do, like finding explosives in carry-on luggage. You can have a little explosive in there, but it might look like a chunk of salami or a big chunk of cheese.
More than a decade after 9/11, security protocols seem strict, but there are still fundamental weaknesses across the aviation world, especially when it comes to technology and how it is used.
We'd like to see aviation security technology being advanced to the point where human error can be removed from the decision-making process, to the point where we're not reliant on the decision of a single person conducting body searches or scanning cargo or hold baggage.
Catching security threats before they reach the aircraft is the most effective way to ensure safety. New technologies are being developed to address gaps in identifying who is traveling, what they are carrying, and the state of mind of passengers and crew. Innovative detection methods are being implemented in airports around the world. Many of them rely on biometric science or 3D facial recognition. And there are new systems designed to prevent any hazardous substance or explosive from making it onto the plane.
Technology could be improved in hold baggage screening or cabin baggage screening, where a sophisticated algorithm within the X-ray machine itself has the ability to detect the presence of an explosive device and automatically contain that.
While there is no evidence linking crew members to the disappearance of Flight 370, it raises questions about the need to evaluate them regularly. There are new techniques that focus on physiological and psychological indicators.
The system that verifies your identity, which is look at your eye movement, can also see if you're drunk, if you have a problem, and if you're anxious. We need to find out that at least the pilot, the co-pilot, and the purser are not under duress before they enter the cockpit and the plane.
With behavioral screening, nervousness or sweating or whatever might indicate that that person has something bad in mind.
But much of this blue sky technology is still in the future. And for many air authorities around the world, it's simply a question of cost versus risk.
There's a sharing of technology is required. What we need to do is to get these advances in technology out of the developed world and into the developing world.
With security and safety checks complete, Flight 370 is approved for takeoff at 12:40 a.m. The Boeing 777 leaves the tarmac of Kuala Lumpur Airport for the very last time. On its way to Beijing, Flight 370 will cross the airspace of neighboring Vietnam. There are protocols for the handover of a flight from one country's air traffic control to the next one.
As he leaves one zone, the pilot will be given information about the radio frequency for the next zone. He will call ahead and let the next zone know where he is and that he is about to enter that zone.
But often during a handover, there can be a radio silence for a few moments. This is known in aviation as a black spot. Malaysian Air Traffic Control gives Flight 370 instructions for the next fly zone over Vietnam.
they were going to call Ho Chi Minh City, and they were given a designated frequency upon which to do so. But as far as we understand, that call was never made.
Exposing the next missing link as the final words from the flight deck echo into the ether.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
One hour into Flight 370's journey, it prepares to transfer from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace. Malaysian Air Traffic Control advises the pilots to check in with Vietnam and then signs off.
Should have been a process whereby they say their goodnights to Malaysian Air Traffic Control and virtually in the next breath they'll say good morning to Vietnam. The instruction was given, it was acknowledged.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
And then silence.
This incomplete air traffic control handover is the next missing link in the chain. With radio comms suspended, air traffic control must rely on radar. But missed handovers are not necessarily unusual.
You may be in the middle of a conversation about the next navigational turn or something like that, and you think, oh, I forgot to check in. It happens. Obviously, it's not supposed to, but it does happen.
But this so-called black hole between international air traffic controls provides a perfect opportunity for those with sinister intentions.
If you're planning for the airplane to disappear, then that might well be the place where you would start it, where you've got 5 minutes grace, perhaps, before real serious investigation starts to take place.
More worrying, 2 minutes after Flight 370's last words, the plane's vital radar tracking device, its transponder, stops working. With 20,000 flights in the air at any one time, transponders are the primary way air traffic control keeps track of them.
A transponder is a device on the aircraft that sits there passively, but the moment it receives certain radar waves from a ground-based radar, it wakes up.
The radar will transmit a question that basically says, "Who are you?"
It then sends a digital message back saying, I'm me, I'm here, and depending upon the complexity of the system on the aeroplane, it may well give more information about the aircraft, its altitude and its position.
High above the South China Sea, there is radio silence from the aircraft and no blip from the transponder on the screens. Vietnamese air traffic control is expecting the plane's scheduled arrival in their airspace. But from 1:21 a.m. on, they can't see or hear Flight 370.
For an airplane to disappear off of their radar screens and not be in communication is a very, very, very difficult thing for air traffic control to live with.
Blind without the transponder, air traffic control doesn't know that the 777 is going way off course, heading west, in completely the opposite direction.
The rate of incidence of aircraft disappearing is really very low.
But it has happened before, with devastating consequences in 9/11, when hijackers took control.
The first thing they did was to make the aircraft go silent. They turned off the transponder and they cut off all radio transmissions. Nobody knew exactly where the airplanes were.
The tragedy sparked a global change in protocol.
When they started to realize what had happened, one of the steps at that point is to contact the security services.
If I was flying over London airspace, and you know how many frequency changes you go through in a very short period of time. If you miss one, if nothing else happens, in 20 minutes you'll have 2 fighters on your wing.
Is another dramatic shake-up of the air traffic control system urgently needed? Perhaps it's time to replace a human handover with an automated system.
An automatic handover would actually be beneficial. But wherever you introduce automation, you introduce the potential
risk.
It's a toss-up between technology giving us some certainty and the human factors giving us much greater control in our perception, but also a failure point.
But the transponder is not the only system that keeps the planes in contact with the ground. There's a second, the Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System, or ACARS.
Aircraft can automatically send back data about their performance to their manufacturers, such as engine performance, fuel consumption, perhaps even the speed of the aircraft.
But crucially, on Flight 370, this satellite messaging system stopped transmitting at about the same time as the plane deviated off course, and the transponder stopped working.
It's within that 10, maybe 15 minutes at the outside that we really need to understand precisely what was going on in the cockpit at the time.
The fact that both the transponder and the ACARS messaging system shut down raises a crucial question.
The transponder became inoperative. How did it become inoperative?
It does appear that at some point, part of the ACARS system was disabled. That could have been either through intentional disabling or through some sort of very specific system failure.
The person best positioned to disable the system is the pilot.
If the pilot needs to turn off the transponder, it's quite easy for him to do. It's located down here on the central console, and it's just a case of go to a single switch and turn that off. Another way to do that, or for example to turn the ACARS off, is to come up here to these circuit breakers and then you just pull the circuit breakers that apply and everything stops working.
There are legitimate reasons why a pilot would turn a transponder off.
I've had to turn a transponder off in flight once. In my case, it was because I had an electrical failure. I can't imagine a situation where you would turn the transponder off and not tell air traffic control that that's what you were doing.
Whether accidental or deliberate, should pilots have the option to switch it off without consent from the ground?
We have to recognize the captain of an airplane is and must be in full control of everything on the aircraft, including having to turn off all electrical systems other than the ones he absolutely needs for flight control in order to cope with, for example, fires.
The idea that you could be overridden from the ground, I find actually quite terrifying. How can the ground make the decisions you make in the air?
Striking a balance between the autonomy of the pilots and the importance of accurate tracking will remain a challenge. A human hand isn't the only possible cause behind the tracking system's failure. A mechanical fault could just as easily shut down the electrics, perhaps explaining why the flight couldn't be tracked and the crew was unable to make a distress call. The Boeing 777 has been flying for 20 years and has one of the best safety records of any commercial aircraft.
The 777 is a very safe aircraft. There are over 1,000 of them in service, and their accident rate is particularly low.
But mechanical failure isn't unknown. In 2008, frozen fuel caused a 777 to crash land at London's Heathrow.
Mayday, mayday, speed bird, 95.
But a more likely scenario for a mechanical failure on board Flight 370 is a cockpit fire, like the one on Egypt Air 667. A short circuit in the electrics ignited the oxygen line into the cockpit. Within 30 seconds, the fire had burned a suitcase-sized hole in the fuselage. If a mechanical fault is to blame, it could explain why Flight 370 unexpectedly turned west.
Any sort of smoke, fire, anything like that, your first move is to land as soon as possible. if something similar happened to Flights 370. That explains the term. Aviate, navigate, communicate. It's not desperately surprising that they didn't manage to get out an emergency message, because had it been some sort of bad cockpit fire, you're talking 20 to 30 seconds. It's not a lot of time.
But there is no attempted landing. Flight 370 flies on in the wrong direction, heading out to sea. However, onboard tracking and comms were disabled. One vital communication link kept going: the pings or handshakes from the satellite antenna.
Pings were an automated response from the aircraft saying, yes, I'm still here.
Crucially, the pings keep transmitting for 6 hours after the plane has veered off course. This development will prove vital in the search for Flight 370.
While those pings don't give us any data in themselves of where it may have been located, we know through those pings that the aircraft was in flight for a number of hours beyond when it lost contact.
We now know the plane flew towards the wilds of the roaring 40s, some of the most inhospitable seas in the southern Indian Ocean. But was man or machine in control?
If the pilot stopped flying the aeroplane, the autopilot will normally carry on, and it will keep carrying on until it's landed the aircraft at its destination, or the aircraft has run out of fuel or something else has gone wrong.
Like a ghost plane, was autopilot taking Flight 370 to its final resting place, leaving the world to wonder where it had gone? Flight 370 is flying off course and into the vast wilderness of the Indian Ocean. A mystery that has exposed a chain of missing links in aviation safety. On the ground, the world is just waking up to the breaking news. There is a missing plane. Relatives and friends in Beijing have gone to meet the arrival of Flight 370. But it never turns up.
Malaysia Airlines confirmed that the flight MH370 had lost contact with Subang Air Traffic Control at 2:40 a.m.
Running dangerously low on fuel, at 8:11 a.m. local time, the stricken plane sends its last automatic satellite handshake signal, or ping. It's more than 7 hours since the transponder was deactivated, and 6 hours since Malaysian Air Traffic Control last heard the co-pilot's voice.
For a large aircraft to go untracked for such a prolonged period of time, that is quite unique.
It's incredible that when we've got so much smart technology, we've got our mobile phones, we've got GPS, we can find anything anywhere in the world, we've actually lost a plane with all those souls on board.
So how do you find a missing plane? The first method is by tracking from the ground using radar. A key missing link: our reliance on technology with limitations.
Radar's been in existence since the Second World War, really. Radar relies on there being a ground station nearby and runs out within a couple of 100 miles of the coast.
Flight 370 vanishes from air traffic control radar screens as its transponder is deactivated, less than an hour into its flight, and just 2 minutes after the co-pilot has said goodnight. The military who use primary radar that doesn't rely on a transponder are still able to track the plane. But after 90 minutes, they too lose sight.
Looking at primary radar, it has limitations. It perhaps has a range of 100, 120 miles at the sort of level that the airplane was at. So it's of limited value.
Malaysian military radar plotted an unidentified object, later assumed to be Flight 370, at a point south of Phuket. Thai military radar logs also confirmed the plane turned west.
The thing that has scuppered us is the lack of ground stations. So we have coverage a few hundred miles out from the shore, but actually, in general, we're not covering large areas of sea where this aircraft seems to have gone.
So as Flight 370 drops off all radar, is anyone watching? And if so, who? There are more than 1,000 satellites orbiting the Earth. The military and commercial companies have spent trillions on satellite technology. Imaging satellites are able to focus down from hundreds of kilometers to see objects just half a meter in length. Surely the missing aircraft must have been spotted.
The vast majority of imagery satellites are in low Earth orbit only a few hundred kilometers up, and they're moving very fast. So taking an image from a satellite of something on the surface of the Earth is like driving a car down the street, looking through a pair of binoculars and trying to read all the house numbers as you go by.
Leading nations like China, Russia, and the US may have been unwilling to come forward with any covert satellite data, as it would reveal their military capabilities.
One interesting question is, at what phase in the search were some of these military and national security capabilities brought to bear on the problem? If satellite capabilities are tasked to help search for Flight 370, that may mean those capabilities are not available for other high-priority national security taskings, such as keeping tabs on North Korea or other potential bad actors.
Malaysia has asked other countries to share potentially sensitive radar and satellite data.
The U.S. military does have some satellites that are dedicated towards missile warning, but those satellites work off of heat signatures, and an aircraft in flight is not generating a heat signature. If there had been a large explosion, then these satellites would have likely picked it up. But U.S. officials have said that these systems did not discover anything that would signify anything like a large explosion, which leads to the mystery of what might have happened.
The military may be helping behind the scenes more than we know, but the issue of national security is always going to leave gaps in the intelligence that is handed over. With few hard facts to go on, the Malaysians now desperately need information and cooperation from their neighbors and the international community.
We had the early part of the investigation, a lot of information, conflicting information, and changing search areas that really led to quite a bit of wasted time.
Search efforts on the ground are hindered by lack of information. There's no effective dialogue between countries and aviation authorities, making it hard to get an overview of what is happening.
It was crisis upon crisis upon crisis. No management of that crisis. Pieces of information about the whereabouts of the aircraft at the early stages perhaps should have been filtered up to a much higher level, a much higher authority.
There was one piece of information revealed by British satellite company Inmarsat. Satellite data from the aircraft pings. But this was ignored, perhaps until it was too late.
With the loss of this plane, what we found is that the countries haven't coordinated and the time has been lost.
There are protocols in place for international disasters, but the circumstances of the disappearance of Flight 370 are unique. For a search effort in international waters, the nation affected can invoke the Charter on space and major disasters, to task countries like the US and China to help.
Members will retask one or more of their satellites to collect imagery over the specified area and provide it to the country that invoked the Charter. However, the Charter does not stipulate exactly how that help or assistance will come. And it's up to the countries really to do a lot of the legwork. There's probably more we can do in the cooperation between different organizations and countries that have different capabilities, particularly satellite imaging, satellite communications.
The protocols are there, but the nations involved need to find a way to communicate faster and more efficiently.
It looks like the unsolved mystery of Flight 370 might bring countries into agreement for a standardised approach, and perhaps an overarching, truly global body sort of may start to evolve, and we do need it.
While the world searched the South China Seas for Flight 370, in London, the techies at Inmarsat decided to track the plane by taking a closer look at the data from the satellite pings, or handshake signals.
The system kept doing this automatic pinging of the home network. There was a signal coming from the ground station that said to the aircraft, essentially, "Are you there?" And the aircraft replied with a, "Yes, I'm here." And that was occurring on about an hourly basis on a pre-scheduled time and frequency.
But satellite pings to and from aircraft are not intended to locate planes. Despite the lack of data, however, back in London, the team take on the challenge. Programmers use the 8 pings the plane did send to track down its possible flight path. Analysis isolates 2 possible corridors the plane could have used. One stretching north between Thailand and Kazakhstan, and the other south between Indonesia and the southern Indian Ocean.
We have used the difference in speed at which the signal has come from the aircraft to the fixed point, the satellite in space. It's called Doppler effect. And if you can imagine a train whistle getting louder as it comes towards you and getting more faint as it goes away from you, we're looking at those signals and deciding where the aircraft was on a particular route and a path.
The team went one step further, designing some complex algorithms to analyze past data of Malaysia Airlines 777 flight paths to Beijing. By doing this, they were able to work out the most likely route the plane could have taken, the South Corridor.
It allowed them to make a very good guess at where the aircraft may have gone. They then tested that against 6 other aircraft flying that same day, and it worked. When they applied that model to the case of Flight 370, they were able to quite convincingly show that it must have gone the southern route.
The search area has been narrowed to a 160-kilometer corridor in the Indian Ocean, west of Perth. The Malaysian Prime Minister breaks the news.
According to this new data, Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
Investigators now know the most likely spot the plane went down, and the multinational search and rescue operation is underway.
There's this uncertainty as to what happened, and we can't stand that. We need to know what happened so that we can avoid it in the future.
But there is a vital piece of evidence they still need to find. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, the black boxes.
Those 2 units should survive a considerable impact, and they can certainly survive being submerged in water.
And if investigators do find the black boxes, curiously, they could prove to be the most challenging missing link of them all. As the weeks pass with no answers of what happened to Malaysian Flight 370, the grief and anger of the relatives grows. Finally, investigators are able to isolate an area where the aircraft may have ditched. It covers 254,000 square kilometers deep into the southern Indian Ocean. But there is one crucial part of the plane they need to find. It's another missing link. The black box flight recorder.
Once we've identified a wreckage field, we have to find black boxes, the 2 recording devices, and the question is, what can that tell us?
There are 2 parts to the black box, both situated at the rear of the aircraft.
Well, the cockpit voice recorder records voice and sound from 4 microphones on the flight deck. The flight data recorder, however, records data from different sensors around the aircraft. On something like a Boeing 777, there'll be up to 1,500 parameters recorded. So it'll be recording speed, altitude, cabins depressurized, a whole host of parameters.
Black boxes are fitted with an underwater locator beacon, which is activated when it hits salt water.
It emits a ping, and it emits a regular little heartbeat signal just to say, I'm here. And so what the searchers have to do is find that signal, and it has quite a short range, not more than a few miles.
Flight 370 has exposed a weakness in the design of the black box.
The weakness is that they can be difficult to find, particularly if there's a crash at sea, and that's one of the things that we've seen with MH370. At the moment, the underwater locator beacon, the battery is only required to last for 30 days. There are changes afoot where it needs to last 90 days, and that's slowly coming in.
Another vital flaw to the black box means, even if discovered, the voice recorder won't reveal what happened in the cockpit when the aircraft changed course.
One drawback on the voice recorder is it only has a 2-hour duration, and that isn't sufficient. We may have missed that event which caused a problem, and that data is then overwritten.
As time is running out, the hunt for Flight 370 continues. It becomes the largest ever multinational air-sea search involving 26 countries.
I think the Australian Navy commander made the best comment on that when somebody asked me if it was like looking for a needle in a haystack, and he said we're still looking for the haystack, let alone the needle.
Yeah.
As hope fades, 4 long weeks after Flight 370 disappears, news breaks that Chinese and Australian search boats detect signals that might be coming from the black box.
British, Australian and US teams are using sonar and listening devices to try and capture pings emitted by the device.
The search intensifies 1,600 kilometers northwest of Perth. But finding and retrieving the black box from the mountainous seabed will be the toughest task yet.
Time is against them. 28 days on from the jet's disappearance, the batteries in the recorders only last for around 30.
Even if they do find the black box, it will never reveal all the details of exactly what happened to Flight 370.
This case may change that mindset towards one where the industry captures more data for over a longer time frame in the black boxes.
The tragic loss of 239 passengers and crew has exposed the limitations of the technology being used in aviation. In a world where we can live stream to smartphones with more storage capacity than the black box, is it time for this technology to be applied in aircraft?
I think a near-term priority is going to be figuring out some sort of a solution to be transmitting real-time data from aircraft in flight to systems on the ground.
In fact, such technology is not far away, and some innovations could be fast-tracked as a result of Flight 370. Cranfield University, a leader in aerospace research, is developing a revolutionary information system, trigger transmission, which utilizes real-time data from an aircraft.
Rather than streaming data from the aircraft all of the time, we wait for the aircraft to get into an unusual situation, maybe in the middle of an accident, and then we choose to start relaying information, its height, its speed, its roll, its pitch, parameters like that, to try and understand whether something unusual is happening.
Trigger transmission will send vital real-time data to the manufacturer and will make it easier to locate an aircraft in the event of an incident, such as Flight 370. But it could be years before it's certified and fitted to passenger aircraft. There is already some technology available to airlines who choose to install it, which allows live performance feedback.
Newer aircraft engines from companies like Rolls-Royce and GE do have the capability to automatically send back data about their performance to their manufacturers.
It's unknown if Flight 370 had this in operation.
had the automatic data reporting been enabled, that may have helped narrow the search window for where the flight may have ended up.
But could aircraft of the future using live data streaming go one step further with a virtual pilot, erasing the possibility of any human error? The University of Tokyo are developing a smart flight control system using artificial intelligence.
The main reason of the aircraft crash is the human factors or human errors. I think we have to develop the fully automatic control system without pilot operations. When the pilot cannot control the aircraft totally, for example, the lack of oxygen or the terrorism, the ground station can control the damaged or uncontrollable aircraft for the safety landing.
As scientists search for innovative answers, solutions may come from technology being developed to meet passenger demand, to be as connected in the sky as they are on the ground. Hyperconnectivity in the skies is about to be made a reality with Global Express.
We are in the process of launching 3 geostationary orbiting satellites, which will orbit the Earth at 38,000 kilometers and be able to provide coverage all over the Earth.
It promises to revolutionize air travel and the connected world as we know it.
It's the benefit of being able to bring your own device onto aircraft, whether that's a laptop or a tablet or your smartphone, and being able to hook up to a wireless access point which is installed in the aircraft. So watching TV, connecting to internet, having the same speed as you do on the ground.
Well, I think with Flight 370, what we really are seeing is we've got a world now where we've got passenger comfort, we've got entertainment systems, business appetite, and it's throwing a spotlight on the fact that we really are putting all of those issues ahead of security and safety.
While hyperconnectivity and live data streaming may help close some of the current technological gaps, scientists are already thinking ahead.
Well, the 6th generation of satellites won't be out until we're into 2020, but we are already planning that. For the cockpit, safety services, communications with the pilots, communications to the ground, the health monitoring of the aircraft are all going to be brought forward to the next level.
As the world continues to follow the tragic events of Flight 370, investigators need to discover the aircraft wreckage and retrieve the black box data to help resolve some key questions. But we may never find all the answers. What we have learned is that this is not just the story of a missing plane. This is also the story of the missing links of aviation technology and communication.
The travelling public needs to be assured that safety and security are paramount, both within the airport and the airline environment. Without the travelling public, there is no industry to protect.
Airplane technology, as sophisticated as it is still fallible to acts of malice or mistake.
We've got to find it, we've got to find what happened, and we've got to learn the lessons to stop this happening again.
The missing links allowed what should have been a routine flight to become one of the biggest mysteries in aviation history.
Ultimately, what it's going to come down to is all this new technology and new improvements. What are the costs that are going to be associated with implementing those? And who's going to be prepared to embrace those costs, whether it's governments, airlines, or the passenger?